Hey everybody, it's me, Randy Ray, the Literate Texan, and I'm here at Driftwood Ranch again talking about and thinking about books. And I thought I would give the whole bookshelf tour a rest for the evening because I wanted to talk about a topic that I see discussed on here fairly often, and it's called how to read more. And most of my regular viewers aren't going to be too interested in this topic because they're probably already reading as much as they want. I mean, after all, you're regularly watching a channel devoted to reading books, okay? So chances are you're reading as many books as you want to, or anyway, chances are you've already figured out how to read more, and reading more or reading a lot isn't really that difficult. I mean, you pick up a book, you start at page one word, and then you move on to word 2 and word 3 and so on and so forth. But there's an implication behind the whole how to read more question that I think is pretty interesting. And that question usually consists of, okay, you want to read more. Most people say they want to read more because they want to watch less television, or they want to read more because they want to spend less time on their phone. Most people don't want to read more so that they get less exercise, though. Most people don't want to read more so that they can spend less time with their kids. They have something else in their life that they want to get rid of or do less of in order to read more. And you might think that this would be the first consideration when figuring out how to read more is what is it that you want to eliminate from your life so that you can read more. But I think that's kind of a secondary consideration to, why do you want to read more? What are your goals for this reading that you're wanting to do? Do you think this will be a more enjoyable form of entertainment? If you're just reading as a hobby and you think it's some kind of virtue signal, but you prefer watching movies or you prefer watching television shows, I would say that's the wrong reason for wanting to read more. This isn't, you don't score points at virtue signaling or going out and saying, "Ooh, I'm a reader." But a lot of people fall into the whole idea of, okay, I want to be someone who's read, but I don't necessarily want to be someone who's reading. And it's very similar to the whole thing of, I want to be someone who's written a book, but I don't want to sit there and write a book. If you're really a reader and you really love reading, you're going to want to read. And that's the stage that I've reached in my life, is that I want to read. I prefer it to other forms of entertainment. And I hope that you do too. But anyway, one of my first thoughts too, when I saw this how to read more question or topic or keyword phrase, whatever you want to talk about it, is a quote I saw from Michael Dirda. Michael Dirda is a film critic at the Washington Post, and he's a Pulitzer Prize winning film critic, and I think he's brilliant. I just love all of his columns. He's great to read. And not too long ago, I read in one of his columns, and I wrote this down so that I could read it correctly, okay? So this is his system for reading more, and I think it's as good a system as any I've heard yet. Mine is a simple system. Begin quote. Mine is a simple system. I read from morning till bedtime, with breaks for my job, family, meetings with my friends, exercise, household chores, and periodic review of my life's greatest blunders. Okay, well, if that's not a recipe for getting more read, I don't know what is, But it's a completely different perspective because most people see reading as something that they do in their spare time, when they're not meeting with friends and family, when they're not working at their job. They read when they're on breaks for their job. But Michael Dirda's job is reading, and it's also his avocation. It's also his hobby. So, he takes breaks from his reading to go do his job, and the periodic review of my life's greatest blunders. Well, I'm sure most of you watching this have already heard some of my stories about going to Alcoholics Anonymous. So there's been plenty of me reviewing life's greatest blunders here and stuff. So, but it also reminded me of a quote from the Bible, and I'm not what you'd call any kind of biblical scholar. I don't know. I think it comes from Thessalonians or something like that. Please feel free to correct that in the comments below if you know what it's actually from. But it talks about how you should pray and how often you should pray. And it talks about praying constantly or praying without ceasing. And the idea behind this is that you should be in constant communication with God. And I don't get into religious topics on here. I don't think it's a good idea on social media. So most people don't agree. They're not going to change your perspective on anything. And they're certainly not going to change mine. And I'm not going to change anybody's either. But if there is some type of spirituality to communing with other minds. Certainly that is tapped into when you're reading great works of literature. You're tapping into the greatest hive mind ever known. And when you're dealing with aspects of the canon, canon works of literature, you're talking about the Bible. At least when it comes to Western literature and the canon of Western literature, you're talking about the Bible being the most significant cultural literary work out there. But then also, there's probably a list of about 15 books that would make up this ongoing conversation that's been going on for the last 2, 3, 4,000 years. Starting with the Bible, certainly Shakespeare, the complete works of Shakespeare would be included in that great conversation. The complete works of Sherlock Holmes, which is a little more lighthearted than some of that, but certainly counts as part of the canon. The Iliad and the Odyssey, there's plenty of works in the canon that you can refer to here and there. Works that I don't generally talk about very much on this channel, but I'm thinking about shifting focus a little bit and moving towards talking about some of these more quote unquote important, if you can call them that, works of literature. And some of that might just be because of the bookshelf tours that I've been going on, because I've bought a lot of works of great literature. My aunt, who recently died about a month ago, I suppose, was a very influential person in my life. She was a big reader. And she was a reader right up until the end, from what I understand. Last time I spoke with her, she said she was still able to read. She had some strokes later in life. But she explained to me that her reading consisted of, she would read a classic of literature, maybe The Count of Monte Cristo or something like that. But then the next week, she'd read something more modern, and then she'd go back to another classic. And she just alternated between the two. But she was the one who introduced me to and fostered my love of Mark Twain. If it weren't for her, I don't know that I ever would have read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. But also, okay, the other question here is, obviously there's 168 hours in a week, okay? And you can't create extra hours for yourself, okay? I know of one reader, Steve Donahue, who only sleeps for 2-3 hours a night, but that's because he's some kind of genetic rarity, That's his mutant superpower, if you will. You can't train yourself to get by on 2 or 3 hours of sleep or not. You're just either part of that tiny percentage or you're not a part of that tiny percentage. He happens to be. I'm on the other end of that. I need 7 to 8 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Generally I get by pretty well on between 7.5 and 8 hours of sleep per night. Although my sleep routine and my sleep schedule is really strange now that I'm on cancer meds, because it used to be I was really consistent about going to bed at a certain time and getting up at a certain time. But now I'm on one set of meds, the dexamethasone is a cancer med that I'm taking, and it's got the word meth right there in the name of the medication, so you can imagine what it does to my energy levels on the day that I take it. In fact, the reason I'm up this late tonight is because I took my dose, but I only take that once a week. So every Monday or Tuesday, I don't sleep nearly as much as I do, and that high level of energy, that nervousness, that, I've drank 2 cups of coffee and it's not going away for 3 or 4 days, keeps me up. I'll sleep maybe an hour or 2 the first night, 3 or 4 hours the next night, 5 or 6 hours the next night, and then the next 3 nights, I'll sleep maybe 10, 11, 12 hours a night. So now I have a weekly schedule for my sleep, which has been really hard for me to adjust to over the last couple of years. The good news is I think I've got about 6 more weeks of chemo left, and then I get to go into maintenance. They expect me to be in remission soon. But one of the things you can do too is, if you don't know where your time is going and you don't know where you're spending your time already, one of the first things that I ever did in terms of learning where I spent my time was keeping a time log. I was in my early 20s and I was working at a telemarketing agency, and my boss wanted to know what I was doing with all my time there. And it was just as simple as printing out a time log. In those days, you had to write it and stuff. But he wanted to know what I was up to every hour of the day. And it was easy enough to keep up with. It's old advice, but it's good advice. It's real easy to do. I've seen that advice repeated recently in, oh golly, I can't remember the name of the time management book, but I'm sure it's going to make it onto my list of 100 self-help books I read so that you didn't have to, which is coming later next year. Some of these projects I'm planning pretty far out in the future, by the way. So it's also pretty easy to keep a log of how much time you spend watching TV. I think most people watch far more television than they think they do. I think 7 hours of television a week is plenty for anybody. But I think the average person probably watches closer to 21 hours of television a week, maybe even more than that. And then phone time, there are apps on your phone that will keep up with how much time you're spending on your phone. I recently got an app on my phone that I really like, and it's called Minimalist, and it gets rid of all the colorful icons that make it so sexy and exciting to log into these apps, and just replaces it with white letters on a black background. And it's really changed my relationship with social media and my phone. That phone's there to serve me. This phone that you're probably watching this on right now, that's there to serve you, okay? You're not there to be at its beck and call. I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb almost constantly. And, I don't need to hear it ringing all the time and stuff. I grew up in a day when if somebody called you, they just left a message. And a lot of us didn't even have, in 1988, we didn't even have answering machines. A lot of us didn't. I remember my aunt that I was telling you about, she got an answering machine. She got her first answering machine, and my grandmother called her up one time, and she had left a message. It was just a normal message. It's like, hey, this is so-and-so, and you've reached me. Please leave a message at the tone, and I'll call you back. And my grandmother said, Marty, what the hell is this? Click. Because she still, my grandmother in 1988 still didn't know what an answering machine was. So she's a delightful woman. So anyway, if you want to read more, also one of the things you can think about, and this is this is no brainer. If you want to read more, schedule time for reading. Okay. So before I got into the mindset of I'm reading from the time I get up until the time I go to bed every day with breaks in between for this other stuff, I was in the mindset of I'm going to schedule an hour to read every morning at breakfast, an hour to read every day at lunch, and then an hour to read at night too. But I'm reading a little bit more than that, or a lot more than that lately, because it's been really difficult to work with any kind of intensity lately. So, but for whatever reason, and maybe this is just a blessing from the universe or whatever, I don't have trouble concentrating on my reading. I'm able to remember what I'm reading. But sitting at my desk trying to create that sort of thing, a little more difficult for me and stuff. So, but scheduling is just a step away from forming good habits. One of the best self-help books that I've ever read, and I'm not a fan of the genre at all, but one of the best self-help books that I've ever read was called Atomic Habits. If you get a chance to read it, you definitely should. It's well worth your time. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but I keep looking away from the screen because I actually took notes before this. I don't work from a script. I do all my own stunts, but I do take some notes here and stuff. So, and you may have goals related to your reading too, and some of these goals may or may not be pertinent to your life. You may want to catch up on your reading because there's an area of knowledge that you want to become knowledgeable about, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a really cool thing to do. Or you just may want to read the great works of literature to expand your mind. One of the best bosses I ever had was David Littman at Hotels.com, and brilliant lawyer, brilliant businessman. But he explained to me that whenever you read a book, it's like you're adding a room onto the house of your mind, an additional wing or something like that. And I've never forgotten that. He told me that something like 30 years ago. And I so agree with him. Also, studies have shown, too, that if you read a lot of fiction, novels and that sort of thing, it increases the amount of empathy that you have towards other people. And I think that's a quality almost everybody could use more of. Also, Harold Bloom has some ideas about how to read and why. I've got his book here. And this is an example of, not everybody can get a personal mentor for an area or a topic. Now, when I was in college, I had a mentor. I had a college professor who was a mentor. We had lunch the other day, and he's hale and hearty and still talking about literature, and I'm still learning from him, even though he's well into his 80s now, and I'm well into my 50s now. But you can also form mentors by getting to know someone so well through what they've recorded on video or what they've written, that they become like a mentor to you because you know what they're thinking about certain things. Harold Bloom, to some extent, is that kind of a mentor to me. I've gotten to know Steve Donahue, who's also a working book critic and will provide me with recommendations for books. So deciding what to read can be a really wonderful experience if you've got someone who can take you by the hand and lead you down that road. And I'm sure that Steve Donahue would agree with me. Not every book that Steve has recommended to me has been, an out of the park home run. But more often than not, I really enjoy the books that Steve recommends. His top 10 lists at the end of the year are not to be missed. I haven't read anything off of his top 10 list yet that I thought were disappointing at all. So those are easy to find online too. You just type in Steve Donahue top 10, whatever genre you're interested in, fantasy novels or whatever, and you'll find it if you include the year in there too and stuff. The average American, let's say you just want to be above average, and I still think this is silly goal, but let's talk about it anyway in case that's your idea. If you want to read more books than the average American might read 12 books a year. Okay, but that's like taking into account all the people who read no books a year too, okay? And that's also only counting the books that people actually started and then finished, okay? If you want a more accurate number, if you include the numbers where people started books but didn't finish them, the number's closer to 33. I don't think it's hard to read 50 books a year. And reading 52 books a year is just a book a week. It's not a big deal. And if you want to know, the math is real easy. You just take the number of pages in the book you're reading that week and divide it by 7, and you read that many pages per day. It's a no-brainer. It's real easy to read 50 books a year. And that would put you well above average. 100 books a year would put you in the stratosphere compared to the average American. Now, compared to the average booktuber, I don't know. There's a lot of people on BookTube, I'll see that read 200 books a year, which is getting to the point where I don't have time for that because I also want to watch BookTube videos and chat with my buddies on BookTube too. As far as that goes, if you want to join a group of people that are going to encourage you to read more often, BookTube has definitely increased the amount of books that I've been reading. Just because I'm getting so many recommendations from so many people that I really enjoy talking to, that I want to be in on the fun. I want to talk about the stuff they're talking about. And I can't do that if I'm not reading at least some of the books that they're talking about here and stuff. So how to read more. Also, if you're someone who wants to read more because you want to read for pleasure rather than read stuff that you like, for God's sake, read what you like. Okay, don't go reading stuff that you hate just because you feel you've got time for it, because you don't have that much time. Take it from me. I'm 54 years old and just found out I had cancer 2 years ago. You've got a limited amount of time to get some reading done. Don't waste it on stuff that you don't like. Also, if you're reading stuff that you like and you're reading stuff that you're enjoying and you're reading stuff that you want to read, guess what? You're going to be a lot more motivated to finish it and actually read it than you will if it's a slog. Some of that advice is advice from Steve Donahue again, who inspired a lot of this advice. But he's absolutely right. It's just, it's a short life. Carpe diem. And if reading's not really what you want to do, don't do it to try to impress other people, because let's face it, most people aren't that impressed. And if they are that impressed with how many books you're reading, they may be impressed by the wrong things. I don't know. So that's my thoughts on how to read more for tonight, okay? And I will probably be back with more thoughts about how to read more and how to read more books soon, because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't cover, You can certainly learn how to read faster. It's a muscle that you can develop over time. But there's, there's just, it's like an unlimited topic. And even though I don't think most of my readers are going to be that interested in the topic, maybe this will inspire some people to want to read more and actually enjoy reading, because it would be great if we became a society of readers instead of a society of TV watchers. I can't help but think things wouldn't be a little bit better in that case. At any rate, that's how to read more. Randy Ray, Literate Texan. Stay sexy. I'll see you in my next video, and I appreciate you watching.